Thank you very much for joining the Mike on Mike show. I have a guest here today, Jordan Mortenson. Did I say that correctly?
Said it perfectly.
Okay. And this is a good counter story to the previous program where I had Mike Pelfrey on and we discussed homeless issues for a long period of time. Jordan has a little bit of history that we'll go into, but I want to go all the way back to the beginning because I was never really a computer nerd. I don't want to say, because that suggests a certain status that I don't think that I have. You know, a computer nerd is somebody who like really knows about computers. I've dabbled in computers since the 80s, and you know, some would call me a nerd. I'm a nerd to some degree. But in any event, Jordan, you have a history that, and when we started talking, you were talking about having a BBS back in the day. Now, what era was that?
That was in the early 90s, mid 90s, something like that. It was called the Funky Chicken BBS.
So for people who don't know, BBS is Bulletin Board System.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And that was really that came before the internet. I remember dialing into local bulletin board systems at 14.4 or something like that.
Yep, really, 28.8.
Dial up, and it was all really super basic programs. So we didn't have bandwidth back then.
No, it started off with like I think it was 4,800 baud, right? And then there was 96, and then there's 14.4.
I had a 2,400 baud modem.
Yeah, that's correct. It actually, I think the first modems were 300 baud.
Right.
So then it just kind of evolved from that.
Yeah, I thought I was real badass when I got a 56K modem. You know?
Yeah. Those were the days. It was like ANSI graphics, ASCII. Text graphics, and they would connect, and then they'd get like a little ANSI art scene, you know what I mean, and they would chat with each other and stuff like that. And but that was long time ago.
Yeah.
And the phone company took an interest in. I had actually started that with one phone line, and my dad would be in the other room and yelling at me, like, "Get off the! I got to make a phone call."
He'd pick up the phone and hear that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the phone company, he took the owner of the phone company. It was Jimi Hendrix down there in Scott Valley, Fort Jones, and they took an interest and they funded that. And before I knew it, I had 5 phone lines in my room and a 7-computer Novell network. So
wow.
Good times.
Yeah,
that was like the start of my quote-unquote computer nerdism.
Yeah, and as I recall back in the day, I remember it was like 1992. I wanted a 300 megabyte hard drive, and it was about $1 a megabyte.
Yeah. Tandy 1000, I think, Radio Shack.
Now you're really getting back there.
Yeah. They had, I think, the 10 megabyte hard drive. It was like $300 when it first came out.
My first one was a 20 megabyte, and I doubled that up to 40. I go, I'm done now. I'll never fill this.
That's right. That's a lot of space for what it was back then. I mean, even images were 256-bit, pixelated images of whatever you could download.
And we thought it was cool as hell.
Very much so. Yeah.
Now, I remember, this is my nerdiness. My cousin worked at a computer company in San Jose, and we're talking like 1980 or something. I went down there, and they had this big box, and it was probably about 30 inches across or something like that, about the size of a stove, and it had a window in the top, and you could look in there, and there was this great big silver disc spinning, and he said,
yes.
He said, that's 10 megabytes.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow.
I think you're referring to the AS400 mid-range, which, and I remember those. I mean, it was, in 92, I mean, it's, that was state-of-the-art stuff.
No. I'm talking 1980.
Oh, 80.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is going way back.
Yep.
So, I was like, 17 or something, Anyway, yeah, that's a very interesting period in my life, and coming up with computer geekiness. So you ran a BBS. How did that happen, and how did the relationship with the phone company fit into that? How did they even know about you?
So there was an IT guy at the phone company. His name was Russ Decker, and he was, their lead IT guy. And, he was participating with my BBS, and he would log in. And it turned out we were basically neighbors, And so then, I just started talking with Russ, and he talked with the owner, Mr. Hendricks, and, just sort of started making everything happen piece by piece. He was like, I think you need a faster system. And then it was like, hey, let's do this. And all of a sudden, like I said, it was like a 7-computer Novell network in my bedroom when I was 14, and this is in Fort Jones, California. It's Scott Valley,
right? Yeah,
Northern California.
That's Podunk City up there.
Yeah, very much so. And so just being in a town that I think I was pretty much maybe one or two other kids in my school were into computers. You know what I mean? The rest of them just weren't. Right. So, which ended up being maybe kids poked fun at me a little bit. But. Hey, it all turned out good.
So you have a little bit of history in pirate radio too. Tell me about that.
That's correct. So in Ashland, I think I was 19 or something like that. I went up to Ashland to visit a friend that was in college, and ended up rooming up with him. And then I got an apartment for 9 months or so. I think I lived in Ashland in total maybe a year. And my downstairs neighbor, who was a licensed pyrotechnician, also was an engineer at the major radio stations, and I can't remember the name of the radio station. It was the Medford Ashland radio, and he built me an FM transmitter from scratch.
Oh, wow.
So it was on a piece of wood, and it had all the components and stuff like that, and it wasn't phase locked. So the FM transmission would broadcast, but it would go from 97.1 to 97.2, and then back to.
So you had to have your hand on the tuner when you were listening to it.
Yeah, and then we made an omnidirectional dipole antenna and put it on the roof, and so my broadcast range from Ashland, I can go all the way to Phoenix.
Wow. Yeah, because you got the elevation there,
right? Yeah. So and I had people on the show. I guess I wouldn't really call it a show. I was just playing CDs of music and stuff like that. But I had a couple college girls that came over, and they pretended like they were strippers, and just really fun stuff.
Yes.
Good times with that.
Little Howard Stern-esque there.
Yeah.
So now. Not long after that, you became homeless.
Correct.
And tell me how that happened.
So I moved up to Portland and got a job at a place called SendQuest. They were one of the first online schools. And I just moved up to Portland, and it, I guess the trend then at the time was you hired on as a temp for 3 months. And then they could hire you permanently. But a lot of times they would abuse that. And so you would have your 3 month, and then they're like, okay, sorry, it's not going to work out. And then I worked at Intel, and I worked at Hewlett Packard, again, 3-month segments up there.
So are these unpaid internships?
No. They were, it was like temp jobs, essentially.
Oh, gotcha.
So, I was paid, and, it was a 9 to 5, and also at that point I was getting married, so, and we had my only son, Malachi. And so, we basically, we were married, and I was getting these little jobs, and, the last one I lost, and I was trying to find more work, and just couldn't happen. And she's like, we've got a son, and, we've got to go back and live down in Medford with my parents. And I can't blame her. You know what I mean? So I just couldn't get into another position. I think I ended up going to Hollywood Video for part-time. It just couldn't pay the bills, So she moved down to Medford, and I just started basically drifting for a bit. And then she filed for a divorce. And so at that point, I'm kind of bummed out. Being at that age and being divorced, I probably shouldn't have got married so young in the first place. But drifting around, hitchhiking, and actually ended up here on the south exit, down there by Walmart, with my thumb out. And it was like 6:37 at night, something like that. And a lady had stopped and said, hey, it's getting late. Do you want to come back to our shop and have some chicken? And I was like, okay, So I got in the car with her, and we went over there to actually right near the J Street encampment that they made. It's like on the corner of the J and Mill right there. Yeah. And it was like an auto body shop, and stayed there. And they're like, well, why don't you just keep staying here and you can guard the place, and that lasted a couple of weeks, and drifted around on couches and stuff like that. And it was ended up in the Gospel Rescue Mission. And I was there for around a year, something like that. And so between really 1997, so like I said, I lived in Ashland, staying on couches, had my own apartment. Between 97 and 2010, there was, I want to say in that gap, there was about 8 years of just homelessness. So living in tents, I slept in a good friend, Jake's Volkswagen bus in his backyard over on 10th Street.
Seems apropos.
Yeah, it was great. There was, I do miss the freedom, You
know what? I know people who have been homeless and, weren't into drugs or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And that was the thing that they liked, was this sort of a hobo type lifestyle.
Sure. Yeah.
Where you're just sort of, you're lazy. You don't want to do that much. And, homelessness accommodates that,
Yeah, it does. And, you can be lazy. And that was kind of the thing. It wasn't really, and I didn't get too much into the drugs. I, dabbled here and there and smoked weed and stuff like that, right? But thankfully I didn't get into the drugs, because I know a lot of the homeless folks today, they're, what is it, like 80% of them are addicted.
Yeah, somewhere on that level. I always cite there's a recent Dr. Phil that featured
that's right,
Brock Spurgeon here. And they talked about the statistic study that had been done that put the number at 78%. Now, I've spoken to many of the people who are interacting with the homeless on a regular basis, and they suggest it's probably higher than that.
Yeah, I would say so too.
And fentanyl is a thing that wasn't before so highly addictive and just sucks people in.
Yeah. I mean, we just had, we had weed, and it was a $10 thing of weed was filled with seeds and stems, and that was like treasure, back then. Of course, it was illegal, but there was meth and heroin, and I think that's pretty much about it at those times. So.
Yeah, we had a phone conversation yesterday about this, and I recall when I came here in 2003, the big thing that was going on locally was meth.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's still a big thing, but the fentanyl is just out of control.
I think so. In fact, I think the chief was saying the other night, I think it was a city council meeting, or no, it wasn't. It was the learning session about that meth is coming back in. So that's interesting. It sucks, and I hope we can get that off the street. That is definitely one of the biggest problems that we're facing.
I would imagine that the supply of fentanyl is going to become less because they're much tighter on the border now, and there's been a lot of enforcement action on that. And so, when you don't have enough of that, I guess you have to have something else to replace it. I wouldn't know. That's not my thing.
No, same here.
But so you were homeless for all that time, and now, I mean, you may wonder if you go downtown Grants Pass and you see, like they used to have it over on G Street. I don't know the exact locations of these camera installations, but you've got a big dome up there, and several other cameras, and big, like a tower that goes up to it.
Correct.
And You build those.
Yeah. So the surveillance trailer, the first trailer that my company RecTech, we built that trailer, and I started RecTech in 2017. We've been doing camera security here local for homes and businesses and stuff. And then I saw those trailers up in Portland, and I'm like, we could do that. So that was the first one. I'd call that beta. And I had actually emailed the mayor at the time, which was Sarah Bristol. And I said, hey, I'd love to get this thing in the community somehow. No response. So she didn't write me back. So I called the chief, and I said, hey, chief, I've got this surveillance trailer. Would you be interested in taking a look? And he said, yeah, bring it down to the parking lot. So I set it up down there at the police parking lot, and they came out and took a look. I think it was the chief and a detective and a sergeant and a couple other officers. And so I'm basically my computer nerd self here with the trailer and surrounded by cops, and being that, I used to smoke weed and like hide under bridges smoking from the police, it was like, oh, okay, this is interesting.
Yeah, you're in a different world.
Yeah. But, so that was the beta trailer, and it's got some pretty advanced technology, artificial intelligence analytics. So you can search for man with red shirt, for example, and it shows you every single video clip of a man with a red shirt. Doesn't matter.
Oh, wow.
So I talked to the chief about that, and they had kind of set me up with a trial and error run, and they used it at Boatnik last year. Yeah, I think it was last year. They used it at Porch Fest up on Washington, and they, a couple other venues in town. And, the chief was like, okay, well, how much do you want for it? And I gave him the price, and they said, well, never mind, and then the J Street encampment thing happened, and the chief calls me up and he says, actually, we're going to need that. So, I basically sold it to the city, and I sold it to them at my cost, essentially, because it was my beta. I didn't make a profit whatsoever on that first trailer. I just said, here's what it costed me. Here's what it took to build this thing. And, I really wanted to support the city and the police department. And I said, here you go.
Well, not only that, is it gets you out there and gets you known. I mean, these communities talk to one another. And that's very interesting. So how did you get from so you're homeless, and then you started this RecTech in 2017. Correct. How did you get there from homelessness?
So I think what really kicked my butt as far as being homeless and getting my stuff together was the Gospel Rescue Mission. You know what I mean? So that was, and the timeline is a little foggy as to when and where and what happened. But the mission, and then Kate Lasky at the library. I actually had walked in and talked to Norma Singer and said, "Hey, I'd love to volunteer." And so Kate Lasky was there, and she would talk to me about setting up a kind of like a wiki. You remember when those were popular? Like I guess there's still Wikipedia and stuff like that, but this was in 2010. And so I had volunteered a little bit, helping people out with computers, the public computers, the OPACs, they call them.
So there would normally be a wiki having to do with a particular topic.
Correct.
And so what would the wiki have been that you would have?
So it was a library wiki. Oh. Yeah. So it was called the Tiki Wiki.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So Kate and I'd worked with Kate on that a little bit, and she said, "What do you need to make this happen?" And I said, "Well, I just need a computer that's on your network somewhere that I could set up the software, and then you guys can start populating this thing." You know what I mean?
Right. So the Tiki Wiki, what would it have on it? Like,
I'm not sure. Yeah, she didn't. We never got that far with it. Yeah, she's but she had facilitated this computer with Ron Dow, who was the owner of Fast Server at the time. And Ron, graciously, he's like, "Hey, do you want a job?" And I said, "Yeah, great." So I applied, and then I worked at Fast Server, and we supported companies like Options for Southern Oregon, the library, Copeland, both factions of Copeland, because there's two. at the time. I don't know if that's still the case. There was Copeland here in Grants Pass, and then there was Copeland and Murphy. And they were, kind of divorced, I want to say.
I'll be darned.
Yeah. And then Family Solutions and stuff like that. And so I was, really thrown into the community at that point, as a network analyst. And I would go to all the options facilities and see firsthand, the people that were struggling and stuff like that. And then, I worked at the Fast Server for almost 5 years and just kind of got burnt out.
Yeah. But by now you now have some money in your pocket.
Yeah, a little bit. It wasn't a very well paying job. $16 an hour. So it was.
Yes, but it beats being unemployed. And by the way, I mean, I'm sure everybody's aware that $16 an hour 8 years ago is a whole different thing than $16 an hour now.
Yeah. I mean, even back then, it wasn't really enough because, I was on food stamps and, I'd qualified for HUD. And so then I get this job and it was almost like I was going a step backwards.
Now the rug gets pulled out from under you. Yeah. But you're self-sufficient, and self-reliant. And so how then did you, so you're working at that, that is coming to an end before the idea for RecTech, or?
Yes. So it basically was coming to an end, and in 2017, I was sort of juggling both, you know what I mean? And I just sort of made the decision to quit working with Fast Server. And, I do miss certain aspects of it, being involved with the library, especially. That, it gave me a good amount of pride because I actually personally deployed all the public computers at all 4 branches of the library, which, that was a great deal of pride for me.
Yeah.
And just kind of made that call and took the risk and went for it. And, step by step, I was able to maintain my existence, and the rest is history.
So now you've been doing this, you said, since 2017. Since when have you been making a living substantively at it?
I mean, I kind of did it as a hobby before 2017. 2017 is roughly when I, got my business license and contractor's license. So I'm a licensed contractor, stuff like that. So, I mean, it was sort of like a hobby thing.
And that your contractor's license deals with security camera systems.
Correct.
And installation and stuff of that?
Mostly like liability and insurance, in case something happens. Like for the surveillance trailers, I have to maintain, not the one in Grants Pass. I do that one for free. I maintain that for Grants Pass for free. I'm a big fan of the chief. Personally speaking, we have a good working relationship. And then we built 2 more that are in Medford right now. So the Medford Police is now, I've got two police departments. So just kind of growing that out.
This is awesome. And the thing that made me think that this would be a good topic, I know this is nerdy and off a normal subject matter for us, but this is a success story for somebody who's been homeless. And you contrast Jordan here with your average attendant down there at one of these camps, and they're doing drugs and doing nothing but bad.
Yeah.
And this is different than that. And I think that this should be an inspiration to people that, if you just take an interest, like you had an interest in computers, that can always take you somewhere.
Correct.
If you pursue that.
Yep.
But you could just as easily do drugs and take that talent and just flush it down the toilet.
Yeah. And, I mean, just to a message to those people that are at those camps, the phrase "fake it till you make it" actually does work.
Yeah.
It does. What
do you think I'm doing right now?
It's just one of those things. It was like, hey, I'm going to do this thing. And there was a lot of opposition to that, just natural opposition in the universe, trying to, get off my feet, being homeless, like, hey, I've got to get a job, but you need a license to get a job. And a license costs $65. And back then, $2 or $3 was a lot of money.
Yeah.
So how can I get a license? And then a car was completely out of the question. And most jobs back then, they're like, well, do you have a car? No. Do you have your license? No.
Yeah, major impediment.
It was not an easy thing to get out of that situation. And, the mission, just so you know, I didn't want to go to the mission. It wasn't like, hey, I'm going to go to the mission. It was like I had no choice.
Right.
There was.
Yeah, that was an option for you. Mm-hmm. Had you been big into drugs, that probably would have been a step too far.
Right. Yeah, because they do have their rules. They don't allow drugs. They don't allow drinking. You have to set. You can't even work for the first 6 months. Right. So, I know there's a lot of people that won't go to the mission because of that. They and other reasons like, well, they won't. I've got my dog, and I'm not going to go because they won't take my dog.
Yeah, in my personal opinion, if you're homeless and you got nothing going on, you really don't have any business having a pet.
No, I agree with you there.
Now, and I understand that rubs people the wrong way.
Well, they do it for warmth. Right. So they have a dog. They have usually a big dog, and their claim is, okay, well, it helps me stay warm at night to snuggle up with this dog. And that was the excuse that people made back when I was homeless too.
Oh, wow.
So they'd say, well, I need the dog because it's warm.
Wow.
But feeding it, like I agree with you. It's like, okay, well, now you have to feed the dog. You have to have vet bills and stuff like that.
It's a responsibility.
Correct.
And you're in a place where you can't even handle the responsibility of taking care of your own needs.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So you know what though? If you have a desire to not be in that circumstance anymore, and I understand that some of these people may well have bought into the lie in their own head that it's basically over for me. This is my life.
Yes. Really, the biggest contributing factor, I would say, to homelessness in the first place is just a general sense of sadness and depression. They can call it depression if they want, but just no self-worth. And I had that same thing, going through a divorce and then drifting around and just giving up all of my stuff. I didn't really care where I ended up or how I would end up or anything like that. I just had zero self-worth at the time, and to have a little bit of self-worth and build your confidence, like I said, fake it till you'll make it. That's starts with your self-confidence. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so
part of faking it till you make it, like I set up this streaming system for the radio show that's done out of here 5 days a week. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I pushed the host to do that, and not knowing. I mean, I knew that I could do it if the resources were put into it.
Yeah,
I could figure the whole thing out. And everything that we do, it's all freeware, you know. And so it was there was no cost to going in outside of the equipment that you need to do that. And so I was faking it my way into that situation, and there's no money being made here. This is but it's analogous to the same thing.
Sure. You know. Yeah, absolutely. And you did it, Mike.
Yeah. and it works, and it has. We've been doing this for years now, and it works flawlessly. After I worked the bugs out of the system and found out what worked and what didn't, we had some crash and burns. Man.
Yeah, I bet.
That's how it happens.
Yep.
And so anyway, you start into security cameras.
Right.
How did so you have? I'm assuming fair clientele here. And
yeah. I mean, it's a funny story, like how and why, what my motivation was to start the security thing. As an IT guy, we used to be kind of the heroes. You know what I mean? We would come in and fix their computer, and
Yes.
yeah, we love you, thank you. At some point, that flipped, and we became something else, kind of like almost the villain, the pain in the ass. My computer's broken, and it's all your fault.
Oh, right, yes.
So and I don't know why that happened. It just sort of flipped, and so I
know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so dabbling with the security cameras and making people feel safe. I'm back to being the hero. Because people are, look, I can look at my cameras, and then,
on my phone.
Correct. And then with the advent of artificial intelligence, now we can see somebody breaking in while it's happening and, call the police right away instead of an after the fact look at, the recordings and see, who's robbing me. It's immediate.
Right. So tell me about that. How does that work? Does the AI recognize, hey, there's something out of the norm here, and then it sends you a notification or something?
So the AI basically, before you'd have motion notifications, so you'd have wind and leaves and snow and rain. Yeah. But the AI says, hey, there's a human here, or hey, there's a vehicle here. And it sends you a notification live. Yeah.
I have a security system at a building I own here in town, and I get all the dumb notifications because I don't have anything like that. It's just a regular
and it becomes
NVR.
white noise too. Like, are you checking every single one of those? Right. No. It's just white noise.
I found that usually it's somebody says something happened, and I go back and look and see what happened.
Yep. So, I mean, that was kind of like the game changer, the AI, when that came in, it was definitely, and so that's on the surveillance trailers too, of course, like I mentioned the analytics, but mostly alerts for, in the case of Medford, the Hawthorne Park trailer. Hawthorne Park is wild. I mean, there's a lot of people coming in and out there in the middle of the night and doing all sorts of crazy things.
Now, I saw a video that you had set up in a parking lot, and it has the little Wall-E eyes on the top there, and tell me about that.
So I call it Wall-E because if you look at the camera, it just looks like the robot Wall-E, that cartoon. But basically below that is ground tracking radar. So we started deploying radar with this stuff, and the radar actually will detect humans and vehicles up to 285 feet out, 180 degree radius.
So then the radar then directs the cameras?
Directs Wall-E, correct. So Wall-E, so if at nighttime, if there's somebody walking through the park, the radar sees that and says, hey, Wall-E, look at that. And so Wall-E zooms in with its powerful optical zoom lens, and it has a night vision capability of 1,300 feet, right? So it can actually zoom into people's faces and see who that is.
Feet. Boy, you must have some really big infrared
lasers. Infrared lasers.
Wow.
So and it's pretty incredible technology from Axis. So Axis is an American-made camera.
So that must be, and now we're getting really nerdy here. I'm sorry, people.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, just deal with it. Probably a pretty dispersed laser, because you can't have a focused laser in somebody's face.
It's not. Yeah, it's kind of like, and it's an infrared spectrum. Right, so it's they wouldn't be able to see it anyway.
But I would imagine you could still mess up somebody's eyes with a non-visible laser.
There's still warning. There's actually a warning message on the camera, but from at a great distance, it's not going to hurt you.
Right.
If you're right in front of Wall-E and you're looking right at the, maybe there's going to be something. I've never done it.
Yeah, right.
So
these are things to be avoided.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is all very cool. I'm wondering if at some point we can go look at some of this stuff.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah,
that'd be really cool.
I mean, in fact, I just put on my Facebook and also YouTube. I've got the video of the Hawthorne trailer with the Medford police logos, and I talked to Chief Ivins over there, and I said, hey, can I make a video of this and kind of use that for advertising purposes? And he's like, sure, go for it. So I'm very proud of it, though, just to be able to help the police department out. And Grants Pass first, and then now Medford. And actually, Warren Hensman is one who referred me to Chief Ivins over there in Medford. So
it is who you know.
Yeah, it's great. I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. So, we're just going to keep building those things and hopefully get them out to all the police departments. And
right. So, I mean, this is how the success stories are built, and it really saddens me to see people, flushing their life down a toilet and doing drugs when they could be doing something like this. And it may take many years like it did for you.
Sure.
I just think that there are different ways of going, and the way that we're dealing with homelessness now, it just seems to be counterproductive. It's not just not productive. It's counterproductive. The enabling.
It is. It's bad.
It is fostering drug use.
It is. And I think enabling is a worse issue than the drugs. Honestly, I would think enabling, because like I said, with my story, I didn't have that. I had lunch at the soup kitchen, dinner at the mission. That's it. There wasn't a bunch of nonprofits giving tents out and sleeping bags and tarps and propane and needles and whatever.
You might not have made it to the mission if that happened.
Correct. I might have been dead right now.
Yeah, because you didn't need to.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. This is the thing, is that you're removing life's normal pressures. I mean, we all have to deal with life.
Sure.
Life is a stressful circumstance, and one thing or another that you have to deal with, and the more responsibility you take on, the more of those pressures are there, and they help you to grow.
Right.
They help you to become whatever it is you're going to become, and if you remove those from people, you're saying, oh, you think you're on the bottom? There's one more layer for you to go down, but they never actually rock bottom out.
That's the problem. I mean, they're not rock bottoming me out. They're not going to progress. I think we're killing these people by enabling them. Unfortunately, of course, the drugs play a huge part in that. But I really don't think that throwing homes at these people is going to make it any better. It's not.
No, it isn't going to help. It's really sad that you have basically business entities that are making money off of the circumstance where you're keeping people disabled. Yeah. You're enabling their disability.
Yeah. You're enabling their suicide.
Right.
Essentially.
Yeah. And so they never find it within themselves to come out of that. And then, of course, the greater availability of drugs like fentanyl. Fentanyl is just like, so crazy, so addictive that, people that were doing heroin occasionally before, now they get hooked into fentanyl, and now they got to have that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, it destroys people's lives, and it's
a big problem.
We're not doing it. They could be helping if we put the same amount of money into like a mandatory drug counseling or drug treatment.
I actually just spoke about that recently on social media. I was like, can't we? I think it was to a response to one of Dwayne Younker's, because we lost the bill. 28, what was it? 20,
right. Yes.
2824.
Right. To overturn HB 3115.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's just like, well, what we really should be doing is having facilities in any town over 30,000 people. There should be a facility that can house 300, people.
Right. And if they did that, the nonprofits would go away and nobody would miss them because there would be, you'd eliminate 99% of the problem, and then you would have the few unfortunate homeless,
right?
Which we all know that they lump everybody into. They're
That's
all the unfortunate homeless.
Yeah.
And in reality, you have drug zombies and then the unfortunate homeless. This little narrow band over here.
Yeah, and there's good homeless folks out there. I'm not anti-homeless, and I don't think Park Watch is anti-homeless.
Yeah, I'm not anti-homeless
not
either.
At all. Yeah,
I just think you know what. I want to see these people get actual help.
Yeah, me too.
Not what's happening now. Because hey, can we all agree? It's clear it's not working.
It's not working.
It's not working.
It's not working. Yeah, and
it destroys cities.
Right.
You know, all over. I mean, have you been to California lately?
Even Hawaii. I was over, on a vacation in Oahu.
Yeah.
And all the beaches, public beaches, it's insane how many homeless people.
Wouldn't you?
Right.
I mean, the most awesome place to be homeless in the world is Hawaii.
Yeah.
My son lived in Honolulu for like 8 years. Mm-hmm. And so we would go over occasionally, and the parks were just loaded with these people.
And that's in only the last few years, because I went to Oahu the first time in 2018, and I don't recall seeing that many homeless folks. They were there.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, because my son was there from like 2012 to like 2020.
I guess it just increased because we were there in August of last year, and it was literally every single park.
Yeah, tents everywhere.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I didn't really dive into what the police are doing and what their situation is with that or how they're enforcing it. Well, obviously they're not.
Well, it would be an interesting study to see the advent of the nonprofits and the correlation between large encampments.
Yeah, it would. It really would. I mean,
California, it'd be real easy to do that study too, I would think.
And we should be able to FOIA request, the money, the government money that's going into nonprofits. We should be able to do a public information request to find out how many tents have they bought? How many sleeping bags have they bought?
Right.
We should be able to know that.
Where did the $24 billion go?
Right.
This is the big question about California and how much money they put
Oregon
into.
too. Wasn't there a considerable amount in Oregon? I want to say.
Almost surely, but it's kind of hard to compete as a news story with $24 billion of dollars that they don't know where it went.
And really, homelessness has been around for thousands of years.
Of course.
It's nothing. There's nothing new under the sun.
Always going to be here.
Yeah. So we're not going to solve it. Nobody's going to fix it. And if you say you're going to solve it, you say you're going to fix it. That's a lie.
Yeah, you're pitching for funding there,
correct.
Probably.
Yeah, correct. And then speaking of that, like the nonprofits, and I know there's a lot of, and I'd like to get to know some of the nonprofits here because I want to keep an open mind. You know what I mean? But say they did have a facility, say they did open something, Vine Street, whatever, right? How do we convince these people to want to go to get that help? They're not going to be wanting to go. We can't force them.
The drugs are going to be in control. And until you take control of the drug situation,
right,
you're not going to come to a good conclusion there. I understand that there may well be people in the nonprofit system that their heart is in the right place.
Absolutely.
But thinking that you can help somebody by giving them something to eat when sometimes the best motivator is an empty stomach.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting you let people starve to death. What I am suggesting is that a little more of the pressures of life need to be brought to bear on these people to make them understand that if anybody is going to save you, it's going to be you.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
You have to make the decision. People could say, oh, I'm going to save Bill. Well, Bill will fix that for you.
He sure will. I mean, it goes back to the enabling. I mean, and on social media, that's why I've been saying, and it sounds cruel, but don't give a dime. Don't give a can. Don't give anything. Food and water, that's it, because all these folks are doing is they're taking those handouts and they're going, and in most cases, they're going to buy alcohol and drugs, and while I was in Eugene, they called us tramps because I was homeless up there too. And the guy said, here's your sign. You could put this on. You can sit on the off ramp, and people will give you money. And he says, just don't forget to add "God bless" at the end of that sign, because that doubles your, because people say, "Oh, God bless," okay,
because they know what the hook is.
Yeah. And it's kind of a disgusting way to,
manipulate money out of people.
It is. I mean, because there's a lot of Christian folks out there, and so it's unfortunate that people would resort to that kind of thing. So,
yeah. Not new though.
No, it's not new. Like I said, it's, thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. I don't really know. I mean, there's been homeless people
yeah. And there always will be. But in that scenario, it's a lot more likely that somebody spends a certain amount of time being homeless and then isn't anymore.
Yeah.
Because an opportunity comes their way and they're clear-minded enough to recognize it in front of them. But, from behind a fentanyl haze, it's very, very difficult to see anything that's beneficial to your life.
No. And those people, they just need to be put into an asylum. I hate to say the word asylum, but it's some sort of a facility where they are taken and put there. And right. I know that sounds horrible, but
it sounds horrible. And that the problem is that we have built the solutions around things that sound warm and fuzzy. Oh, like we need to take care of them.
Yeah, it's not warm and fuzzy, is it?
No, it isn't warm and fuzzy. And the reality that one has to face. I mean, the very first thing you got to do is dry out.
Yeah.
And that's a painful process, which many drug addicts don't make it through. They start feeling the pain coming on and they do everything they can possibly do to get the next hit.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah,
it is.
And so you need to put them in a place, whether that, you could call it something different than asylum,
we got rid of those. What was the 80s or something when pharmaceutical companies are like, no, we can make drugs that can fix everything.
Right.
And we started getting rid of those asylums. And that was, in my opinion, a big mistake.
Yeah, it was a big mistake. And so here we are.
Right.
But those circumstances, the asylums, the mandatory drug treatment, or flat out jail or prison, a lot of people, I interviewed a gal the other day that said prison saved her life, but she's not the only one who said that.
No, in fact, my brother-in-law, well, I'm not technically married yet, but my brother-in-law, Keith, he's been sober for 11 years now, and he's such a good man. Now, he was really heavily into the drugs, and he went to jail for like marijuana, right? And in that, being in jail, that actually is what saved his life. I'm thinking, he's nice and clean now, and he's got a family, and so it does work.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah, it's not that we can't do this; it's the money that's involved in the nonprofit system, and then there are political tie-ins to this whole nonprofit system, because it happens that a lot of almost 100% of the money that they get is coming out of the government in some way.
Yeah.
And there is some changing to that, because the whole Doge thing is addressing some of that. But then you have it on a state level, and there are some corporate entities that donate to this sort of thing as a sort of a virtual signal. They probably don't even really know that they're not helping people that much.
A lot of them do. A lot of people do think that they're helping when they give handouts.
No, I understand that.
Yeah, and that's something that we as the community need to address to everybody in the community, is stop handing stuff out. You need to stop helping these people that way, because it's not going to help them. Right. And I know that firsthand.
Yeah, if you really love them.
Right.
You would, sometimes tough love is what is necessary. People need to know that I have to meet a certain standard. And they have to want to be there. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a big thing. You got to want it. Yeah, you really do.
You do have to want it. Well, I appreciate you coming in and talking to me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You know what? I love a success story. And there should be more of these. And fostering this type of thing where you find out what somebody's talents are. I would imagine the mission was somewhat in that realm. You find out where people's talents are, and try to help them get to that place, or just have your head in a place where you can take the talents that you have and put them to good use.
Yeah. I think that it doesn't matter what the talent is. It really doesn't. Like, you can be good at anything and make it happen.
We're all blessed in different ways.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. And hopefully we'll have more of these. If you have a success story of coming out of homelessness, get in contact with me. Maybe we'll talk. We'll put together a show with a whole bunch of people that have done this, because you need to have something to inspire the people who can be inspired. And the rest of these people, frankly, you need to put them in an asylum.
Yeah, asylum. drug rehabilitation, something. But
I'm a bad man.
No, I get it. It's just, we can help these people. You can. You just got to fake it till you make it, right? You got to believe in yourself. Stop being sad. You can do this. As if you're out there and you're homeless, make it happen. Just do it. One step at a time. It doesn't have to be all at once. So.
Jordan Mortenson.
Mortenson, yep. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Thank you, sir.